Good morning. I'm here in Windsor, Connecticut, and I'm on property that at the moment will be qualified as open space. That's because the owners have decided rather than develop it, they're going to grow trees. But in the future, this could be developed or it could be preserved. And if it's preserved, it's going to be due to a group of individuals known as the Windsor Land Trust who have been working steadily to try to preserve land and open space in Windsor, Connecticut. What I'd like to do now to start is by introducing the chairman of the Windsor Land Trust, Frank Davis.
The mission of the Windsor Land Trust is to protect and preserve open space here in Windsor. Currently, we have approximately 35 members and 4 board members. Myself, Jim Kandick, Ken Wilkos, and Sam Hinckley. We achieve our mission of preserving open space here in Windsor by outright purchase of property from landowners, accepting donated property from landowners, and purchasing the development rights from existing landowners. The town of Windsor established an open space fund. Our goal is to leverage that fund as much as possible through using state and federal grants. We also educate the public, town government, and the business community on the importance of preserving open space and our collective effort to protect it. Next, we're going to go to historic downtown Windsor, and we're going to meet the rest of the Land Trust. Thank you.
We're here in the center of Windsor at the homestead of Daniel Clark, one of the big dogs of early Windsor. Now, let's think for a second. Why is Windsor where it is? Well, I think the answer is water. Right down there, the Farmington flows into the Connecticut. That's where the first trading post established Windsor. 6 years after Windsor was founded, Daniel Clark shows up and very quickly becomes a very prominent man. So if his home was here, this must have been a very good spot. Now if you're in the early colonies, you're going to need water very close. Right up there, 700 feet, a 5-minute walk through the woods, Millbrook. Millbrook flows into the Farmington. So you have the Farmington that bisects Upper Windsor. You've got Millbrook that cuts across the middle of Windsor. You've got the Connecticut that cuts down the side of Windsor. These waterways were very, very important corridors of commerce to the early settlers. They're still important as corridors of commerce in some ways. But what they have become much more important for now is wildlife corridors. The Connecticut, the Farmington, and yes, Millbrook are very important contiguous corridors for wildlife. You see, wildlife, they have a tough time existing in just one small little area. They need a range and a diversity of habitat. And that's what the Millbrook provides, cutting right across Windsor. And that's why we all need to be conscious of any encroachment on that valuable open space.
Okay, so here we find ourselves in the Pigeon Hill section of Windsor, one of the original roads ever to be put into service here in the town. And what we'd like to talk about is the wildlife corridor area and its importance to the overall impact of Windsor and keeping its historical character. Now, what you can see here in the background is you can see one of the tributaries that feeds into the ever well-known Millbrook. And what you can see is you can actually see, for example, like a lot of erosion there where you can see like a straight drop off. And that's something that has occurred over the last couple of years as a result of development. And what you'll see here shortly is some of the development that has impacted this tributary and its negative impacts on the overall Millbrook Corridor. So obviously realizing economic impact of what these businesses do for us, we also have to be cognizant of being able to preserve land for our future generations here in Windsor. So as you'll see, as a result of development, Up on the top of the hill here, you'll see a very important piece of building for communications here in Windsor and the Northeast is the Verizon Tower there. Now that building, as large as it is, what that does is that actually shifted the water tables here in our area and has pushed a lot of the water down here into this tributary, which is contributing to the erosion. Now the wildlife corridor, which is this whole area, is an important focus for the Windsor Land Trust. And toward the top of that hill again, you'll see an area that has already been purchased by the town and the Windsor Land Trust and put into forever preservation. There's also 24 acres on the other side of this property that's also been put into recent preservation, and that will never be able to be developed. And there are additional focus areas that we at the Windsor Land Trust are focusing on to contribute to continue to be able to contribute to land preservation and the wildlife corridor and its importance. So here we find ourselves on the upper field here on Pigeon Hill Road. This is actually part of my property, but the Windsor Land Trust worked really closely with the town of Windsor to preserve a really important piece of this wildlife corridor area. And as you can see behind me here where the cattle are, just on the opposite side of the cattle there is a piece that was preserved by the Windsor Land Trust in the town of Windsor forever to be held back from development. And that was owned by the Thrall family, who were gracious enough to work with the town of Windsor to be able to hold that in forever preservation. And what that does is that connects with the wildlife corridor all the way down to this area here, if you can see. And we are currently trying to work on another piece here. There's 24 acres of land right here in the middle, where you can see the barn that you just panned by. And then just after that is another 24-acre piece of land that was put into the Windsor Land Trust and the town of Windsor's Preservation Fund.
Here we are in the heart of the Millbrook Corridor. This beautiful pond, fed by tributaries of the Millbrook, is a vital watering spot for much wildlife. You see, the Millbrook Corridor cuts right across through Windsor and feeds into the Farmington, providing a vital link for all the wildlife in Windsor to have a refuge. The piece I'm standing on, we've yet to preserve. We're working with the owners and the town to try to come to a cooperative agreement to preserve. The pieces we just saw are just over there. That would form a huge contiguous piece from Pigeon Hill Road down to the Millbrook that would be fantastic for the town of Windsor. Let's take a walk right down to Millbrook and see the heart of this area. So here we are, Millbrook itself. Up that way, Bloomfield. Down there, the Farmington. Cutting right across the heart of Windsor, a vital wildlife corridor. Now that we've explored the Millbrook Corridor a little bit, let's go down to Mattianic State Park and see what else the Windsor Land Trust has been active in helping to preserve.
We're standing now in Mattianic State Park in the southern part of Windsor. And I'm wondering how many of you really knew that there was a 250+ acre park in the southern part of Windsor. I don't think a lot of people in town do. The park actually is on the north edge of Keeney Park and then on the south edge of Walcott Avenue, where there's an entrance to this area. The park is actually owned by the DEEP, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, but we consider it as protected open space in Windsor. One of the reasons you might not be aware of it is that this park has several different names, and in addition to Mattianic State Park, I'll have to read these off. It's also known as the Mattianic Dunes State Park on some maps, and the Mattianic Sand Dunes Natural Area Preserve on others. Some years ago, with the efforts of Everett Doe Sr. in Windsor, who a lot of you probably remember, a trail was cut through the woods that runs for about 1.5 miles. And we're hoping to get that trail opened up again. There are some trees down from the October 2011 storm that need to be cleared, but we hope to work with the with the rec department in Windsor to achieve that. There probably will have to be a management plan from the DEEP first, because there are some endangered species located in the sand dunes in the area. But it's a beautiful trail to hike on. Last year when I was hiking on it, a bobcat ran down the trail in front of me. Now, earlier this year, Hartford columnist Peter Martecka explored this area, and he was amazed to find that it was so close to developed parts of Windsor and Hartford. And he gave a little history on the place. He said the reason for the sand dunes are that this whole area was once submerged under the glacial Lake Hitchcock, and that's what gave rise to the sand dunes. Now, we're also interested in some other areas that abut Mattianic State Park, and I'm going to tell you about two of those. On the eastern edge of town was a 6-acre parcel that was owned by the Department of Public Works. And half a dozen years ago, I want to say, they put it on the market, and they were asking $100,000 for it, something beyond our resources. And Frank Davis, who was the chairman of the Land Trust and was on the Conservation Commission at the time, approached the DPW and said, hey, instead of selling this property, what about giving it to Windsor? And we'll protect it as open space. They mulled that idea over for a while, and we had further discussions, and what eventually evolved was, why not transfer the property to their sister agency, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, it was the DEP at the time, and roll it into Mattianic State Park. So they agreed to that. There was a rundown house on the property and some other cleanup that needed to be done. But the town of Windsor undertook that with their own labor and with $18,000 from the Open Space Fund. So what we ended up doing was adding 6 acres to Mattianic for about $3,000 an acre, a fantastic bargain. Now I'm going to flip you over to the east side of Mattianic State Park, where another parcel came to our attention 4 or 5 years ago. Things happen slowly, but that was on 200 East Pershing Street. And there were roughly 17 acres, as I recall, there that the owner was trying to sell. And he was asking a lot more than we could pay for it. But we put on our thinking caps, and a year or so later we became aware of grant funds that were available from an agency, and I'll have to double check on that. That was the Recreation and Natural Heritage Trust Program. So the Land Trust actually filled out an application to acquire that land by the trust, and gave it to the owner. He submitted it to the state. We had a number of discussions with DEP at the time. They ran it through their acquisitions committee, they did appraisals, and they eventually bought the property from that owner and rolled it into Mattianic State Park on the west side. So we've added about 21 acres to this parcel, which was about 250 to start with. So it was a nice increase. So I hope you'll get a chance at some point to come and visit Mattianic State Park.
All right, I hope you enjoyed our tour of Windsor and looking at our preservation and protection efforts in the wildlife corridor areas. I'm Frank Davis, I'm the chairman. This is Sam Hinckley, Ken Wilkos, and Jim Kandick. We just left Manianic State Park in Windsor. I'm glad you met the board from the Windsor Land Trust. We're very proud of our accomplishments so far. We've preserved 53 acres of permanent open space here in Windsor. We are looking for new members. We're looking for active members, and we're on the web. It's www.windsorlandtrust.org. We're also looking for those landowners that have that special property that they'd love to save and see preserved. Hope to hear from you. We'd love to hear from you.
And from various places in Windsor, preserved and unpreserved, I'm David Davis for Win TV.